World's first flying bike hitting the market. Right now, only available in Japan.
They didn't ask for permission. They didn't make a prototype for billionaires. They just built it. And now the ground beneath our feet is starting to lose its power. In a world where cities are suffocating under their own infrastructure, where every commute feels like a slow-motion surrender, a radical invention has quietly taken flight. No fanfare, no glossy press tours. Just a $2,000 flying scooter born in secret labs across Japan and Korea, engineered not to impress but to escape. How do you regulate the air when the sky belongs to everyone? How do you stop a revolution that folds up and fits in your closet? Watch closely, because by the end of this video, you might never look at a traffic light the same way again. Hidden flight foundries. In quiet, unmarked buildings scattered across Tokyo and Seoul, a team of engineers was working against gravity and time. There were no stage lights, no keynote speeches, no viral product demos, just rows of workbenches, handwritten schematics, and the hum of relentless invention. These weren't billionaires chasing status symbols like aerial yachts or flying limousines. They were problem solvers focused on one question: how do you democratize the sky? What set their mission apart was not ambition, but constraint. Could personal flight be reduced to the scale of a backpack? Could something once reserved for science fiction be made affordable, safe, and small enough to live in a city closet? These weren't legacy aerospace veterans. They were mobility thinkers, battery chemists, roboticists, united by a singular vision. Each breakthrough, each failed test, brought them closer to a flying device, engineered not for fantasy, but for function. The core idea was deceptively simple. Merge compact electric motors with ultra-efficient batteries into something no larger than an electric scooter. Yet this design would allow liftoff, quietly without seeking headlines. They tested version after version. Some caught fire, others barely rose an inch. But iteration by iteration, the impossible got closer. And in time, what began as napkin math and garage ambition began to look like the real thing, engineering the impossible. From those workshops emerged a machine that defied the limits of scale, power, and expectation. The cyberfold flying scooter was more than a prototype. It was a compact engineering marvel, powered by twin electric motors generating 40,000 watts. It offered vertical lift capability in a vehicle the size of a carry-on suitcase. Smooth, controlled takeoffs and landings weren't theoretical. They were tested, repeatable, and stable. At its core was a revolutionary battery system, developed in collaboration with Samsung's energy division. A 72-volt, 60-ampere-hour pack delivered up to 150 kilometers of range. That kind of endurance, paired with the demands of lift propulsion, represented a major leap in urban battery technology. And with a fully integrated cooling system, the scooter could sustain performance without thermal drop-offs or safety risk, critical for stop-and-go flights in dense urban areas. But the cyberfold's defining innovation wasn't just how it flew, it was how it vanished. The frame folded flat in seconds. The motors retracted. The entire system could slide under a desk, sit in a hallway closet, or ride underarm onto a crowded train. For commuters, it erased the need for parking, garages, or even dedicated infrastructure. It was personal flight, engineered for life as we actually live it. Behind every clean design line were years of redesign. Engineers agonized over weight ratios, noise thresholds, stability during sidewind liftoffs, and redundancy in case of failure. Hundreds of micro decisions layered into a device that wasn't just futuristic. It was usable, scalable, and manufacturable. This wasn't about spectacle, it was about practicality. And the result was a flying scooter that no longer needed permission to exist. First liftoff moment. The moment didn't happen in a stadium or on a stage. It happened at 4:42 in the morning, inside a dim warehouse lit by cheap fluorescent tubes. The cyberfold prototype stood motionless on a steel platform, its motors silent. Engineers stood still, some holding tablets, others just watching. Then the hum started, subtle at first, then steady. A low vibration rolled through the room. Without fanfare, the scooter began to rise, first by inches, then a full foot. It hovered perfectly still. No drift, no wobble, no wires. The room didn't erupt in applause. There was just silence, controlled breath, quiet awe. Months of sleepless nights had produced something real. They had done it, a portable, affordable flying scooter, off the ground, stable, and autonomous. The news didn't break headlines, but inside industry forums, engineering circles, and investment channels, word traveled fast. Something had changed. Transportation had a new chapter, and it didn't come from Tesla or Airbus. Governments took notice. Regulatory agencies held emergency meetings. Aviation boards quietly requested specs. And for the first time, city infrastructure experts began to ask uncomfortable questions. How do you zone for flying scooters? How do you police the sky? How do you stop something that fits in a backpack and bypasses every traffic law ever written? That first flight wasn't just a test, it was the first ripple of a tidal wave. Because while the world was still sleeping, a $2,000 flying scooter had lifted off, and nothing beneath it would ever look the same again. We spent weeks tracing patent filings, industry leaks, and engineer logs to verify that Flight Moment wasn't a hoax. Now you know the truth. Portable flight is real, and it's already disrupting the rules of gravity. If that saved you hours of digging, tap subscribe. We've got more coming. The $2,000 revelation. When BYD quietly dropped a price tag of $2,000 on its new flying scooter, the industry didn't blink. It panicked. The announcement hit social media first, then cascaded through major news outlets, drowning out headlines about multi-million-dollar prototypes in a matter of hours. What had once been dismissed as a design fantasy was now very real, and priced within reach of the average commuter. For years, vertical takeoff and landing machines had been synonymous with excess, tech toys for billionaires or government projects with six-figure costs. Air taxis often came with unit estimates topping $300,000, while even standard electric scooters rarely offered more than wheels and range for up to $2,000. And now here was the cyberfold, ground and air mobility, dual motors, and compact design, all for the price of a laptop. Manufacturing analysts were floored. How could BYD make it work at scale? Could the margins possibly be sustainable? Speculation only fueled demand. Pre-orders surged within days, forcing the company to expand production forecasts and fast-track supplier deals. The price point didn't just break market assumptions, it detonated them. Consumers stopped viewing vertical flight as futuristic and started asking logistical questions. How do I store it, charge it, insure it? This wasn't just about pricing, it was a cultural shift. Overnight, the cyberfold went from curiosity to category definer. The idea of personal air mobility wasn't new, but never before had it landed on the consumer's doorstep with a number that made it hard to ignore. It wasn't a press stunt, it was a product, and it had changed the rules. The moment the price was revealed, the silence that followed wasn't disbelief, it was recalibration. The world was suddenly facing a new reality, and in boardrooms across the globe, strategy sessions were already underway. Redefining accessibility. Within hours of the announcement, one truth was clear. The cyberfold wasn't just a vehicle, it was a signal. Personal flight no longer belonged to the elite. It now served commuters, students, delivery drivers, anyone ready to rethink their daily route. BYD's choice to go wide instead of premium broke from tradition. No luxury rollout, just scale from day one, backed by national distribution, fleet pilots, and service programs. Analysts ran the math. At $2,000, the cyberfold matched high-end e-bikes, but with vertical lift. For millions, it was a mobility upgrade that made both emotional and financial sense. Institutions noticed. Universities considered campus fleets. Employers priced bulk options for long-distance staff. Transit agencies explored last-mile flight links. Soon, stories flooded the internet. A nurse saving 40 minutes, a courier doubling deliveries, a teacher replacing her car. This wasn't luxury, it was freedom, portability, practicality, and it was already in use. Other manufacturers had no choice. The roadmap just changed. Industry's reckoning. Within a day, automakers and air mobility startups were issuing press releases promising faster timelines, cheaper units, and sudden pivots toward consumer-focused strategies. Urban air taxi companies, once proud of their exclusivity, found themselves in crisis talks. Meanwhile, legacy scooter brands scrambled to prototype models with rumored lift capabilities, hoping to avoid irrelevance. Wall Street didn't wait for confirmation. Shares in traditional micromobility firms dipped as investors shifted toward BYD and its parts suppliers. Analysts redrew trend lines, cost curves, Forecasts. The once distant dream of flying mobility had become tangible, and now the only question was, who could keep up? Technology expos reflected the shift instantly. Where stages once featured concept models and futuristic sizzle reels, the conversation turned to supply chains, retail readiness, and component access. Was the cyberfold a breakthrough or a gamble? Could BYD maintain quality and safety at such a price? Or was this a smartphone moment, where aggressive pricing captured the public's attention and built momentum too powerful to contain? Behind the scenes, contingency plans were activated. Battery producers raced to secure materials. Motor manufacturers doubled forecasts. Consultants began modeling component shortages, price swings, and potential partnerships. Rumors flew about ride-share platforms integrating aerial fleets, pushing traditional scooter logistics into the air. But the reckoning wasn't just technical, it was legal. Transportation ministries and city planners convened emergency meetings. Guidelines that would have taken quarters to draft were now being discussed over weekends. What began as a niche concept had burst into the policy mainstream. And with regulators suddenly aware that flying scooters could be sold at department store prices, silence was no longer an option. The industry's long-awaited disruption had arrived, and it was much smaller, cheaper, and closer than anyone had imagined. Pricing as a policy signal. The cyberfold's $2,000 price tag didn't just ripple through markets, it rang like an alarm in government halls. What had once been a futuristic novelty suddenly became a mainstream concern. Vertical mobility, previously seen as years away, had entered public policy, and the price made it impossible to ignore. Cities that had just begun regulating e-scooters now faced a far more complex challenge. Thousands of foldable, low-altitude aircraft with no clear legal classification. Mayors acknowledged the void, and planning departments scrambled to draft frameworks. Vertiports, aerial lanes, and low-speed flight permits started appearing in urban proposals. Aviation boards launched urgent reviews on motor safety, thermal battery containment, and emergency landing protocols. The price also triggered a shift in infrastructure planning. Budgets earmarked for roads and bike lanes were reallocated to fund micro-landing pads and rooftop charging stations. Think tanks warned of ripple effects, from declining public transit usage to shrinking parking revenue. Insurance regulators debated hybrid coverage models. Should riders be treated like motorists, drone pilots, or something else entirely? Tax agencies weighed in, questioning how to classify and track this new mode of transportation. Meanwhile, privacy advocates and neighborhood groups raised concerns about noise, cluttered skies, and low-flying surveillance risks, leading to packed town halls across major cities. The cyberfold's cost didn't just unlock the skies, it forced governments to catch up overnight. Policy timelines collapsed. The old battle for the road was over. Now the real fight was in the air, and the price of admission had just fallen into reach. Skyborn commutes. Picture a routine commute cut from 1 hour and 20 minutes to just 10. No traffic lights, no bottlenecks, no delays. In the heart of Tokyo's gridlocked morning rush, one commuter made the switch from train car to cyberfold, soaring above streets he used to crawl through, and he wasn't alone. Early trial data painted a staggering picture. Average commute times dropped by over 60%. The psychological shift was just as dramatic. Riders reported lower blood pressure, reduced stress levels, and more usable time each day, time that had previously been lost to exhaust fumes and brake lights. The impact wasn't just personal. Environmental studies suggested that replacing even a fraction of car-based trips with electric flight could cut carbon emissions by nearly 40% along high-traffic corridors. Cost modeling revealed another surprise. Commuters stood to save hundreds each month by eliminating fuel, parking, and time lost to delays. Courier services were among the first to capitalize. Midday deliveries doubled in volume as riders bypassed bottlenecks that once ate up their schedules. Pedestrians looked up as small, silent scooters glided overhead. What was once spectacle was becoming routine. The commute wasn't dead, it had evolved, and so had the city. The skyline, long dominated by construction cranes and helicopters, was being redefined by the everyday. The cyberfold didn't just lift its riders, it lifted the idea of what travel could be. For the first time in living memory, the air above us wasn't just for planes, it was the new express lane, pocket-sized portability. Where most vehicles demand space, the cyberfold asks for none. This wasn't just a flying machine. It was a collapsible tool designed for the tightest apartments, the most crowded office buildings, and the most unforgiving commutes. Its frame, built from aerospace-grade alloys and high-strength polymers, could fold down in seconds. Folded, it fit under desks, inside gym lockers, or next to grocery bags in cramped hallways. For urban dwellers accustomed to fighting for every inch of storage, the portability was a revelation. Test users took it onto subway platforms and tucked it under their seats. Others brought it aboard elevators or carried it across campus on foot. In a city where real estate commands a premium, the ability to take your vehicle indoors wasn't just a convenience. It was a security upgrade. Theft risk vanished. Outdoor damage disappeared. As adoption grew, so did the infrastructure around it. Charging stations popped up in cafes, co-working hubs, and libraries. Safety modules and training videos helped first-time users learn flight basics in under 10 minutes. Maintenance plans offered modular component swaps, reducing downtime and increasing repairability. The scooter didn't just integrate with life, it reshaped it. Multimodal commuters embraced the cyberfold as a bridge between rail lines and rooftops. Fold it, ride it, tuck it away. The line between public and personal transport began to blur, and in that space, the cyberfold flourished. Beyond the concrete jungle, the cyberfold didn't stop at city limits. With a flight range of 150 kilometers per charge, the same scooter that sliced through morning traffic also soared past tree lines, past city fences, past the predictable. Weekend explorers quickly discovered its untapped potential. Trips that once took 2 hours by car could now be completed in less than 30 minutes by air. One pair of adventurers flew 20 kilometers to a remote lake, arriving refreshed, above traffic, with zero emissions and zero stress. Tourism boards took notice. Remote towns reported spikes in weekend visitors arriving by scooter. Rural restaurants and boutique lodges embraced the new aerial clientele. Economic bridges were being built, not by highways, but by folding flight. Insurance companies responded with custom coverage for recreational flight. Volunteer pilots emerged with cyberfolds repurposed for medical deliveries to underserved areas. Safety watchdogs noted a trend: fewer road incidents on treacherous rural paths, replaced by safer low-altitude travel over otherwise inaccessible terrain. Environmentalists praise the low-impact footprint, a cleaner alternative to dirt bikes or SUVs in outdoor areas. App developers rolled out new navigation tools tailored to rural flight, mapping safe zones, emergency landings, and scenic routes for weekend adventurers. This wasn't just a city solution, it was a freedom platform. With the cyberfold, travel wasn't confined by roads. It was reimagined by air, flight in the community. Communities soon discovered that shared flight corridors fostered new social dynamics. Groups of hobbyists organized weekend sky rallies, flying in formation above familiar streets and parks. Schools introduced educational programs where students learned principles of aerodynamics and environmental science by piloting miniature prototypes. Neighborhood associations petitioned local authorities to designate low-altitude lanes above communal green spaces, ensuring safe passage and preventing mid-air conflicts. Riders formed volunteer networks offering emergency lift services, such as rapid medical supply deliveries to isolated locations. Art collectives embraced the new aerial canvas, staging sky graffiti performances using light trails against twilight backdrops. Public safety agencies integrated flight data into urban monitoring systems, tracking traffic flows both on the ground and in the air. This data helped optimize resource allocation, from repositioning buses below to rerouting delivery drones above. Local entrepreneurs seized the moment, launching rooftop cafes with charging docks and scenic viewing platforms. Online platforms emerged where residents shared flight path recommendations, safety tips, and maintenance hacks, strengthening peer-to-peer support. Municipal hackathons invited citizens to co-design future vertiport networks and integrate community art into aerial infrastructure. As this aerial community matured, the line between ground-bound infrastructure and skyborn pathways blurred, setting the stage for the next phase of regulatory and societal transformation. Urban blueprint uprooted. In cities built on asphalt arteries and subway veins, the advent of personal aerial mobility threatened to pull the plug on long-standing revenue streams. Municipal budgets that depended on parking fees, vehicle registration taxes, and transit fares suddenly faced the prospect of a significant shortfall. In one major metropolis, studies projected a 30% decline in parking revenue within 6 months of widespread cyberfold adoption. City councils convened emergency budget sessions, debating whether to repurpose parking garages into vertiports or convert bus lanes into sky corridors. Urban planners drafted three-dimensional maps of micro-landing pads atop municipal buildings, envisioning rooftop hubs connected to local microgrids for charging. At the same time, transit authorities reassessed ridership forecasts, commissioning analyses to understand how aerial commutes might siphon passengers from buses and trains. Some officials proposed differential pricing, charging aerial lanes at premium rates to offset lost ground-based revenues, while others envisioned bundled sky and subway passes for seamless multimodal travel. Development agencies issued requests for proposals to redesign neighborhoods with layered mobility, assigning architects and engineers to envision cities where ground-level streets intertwined with aerial highways. Emerging vertiport concepts ranged from simple retractable ramps to fully enclosed aerodromes perched above skyscrapers. Communities voiced concerns about noise pollution, safety over public parks, and the visual impact of low-flying scooters. That chorus of debate made clear that the urban blueprint had been uprooted, demanding a reimagined plan for the layered city. Meanwhile, regulators faced a question that no existing law had anticipated: how to classify these hybrid devices. Regulatory gray zones. As the cyberfold introduced partial lift capabilities to the masses, legal framework drained under the burden of ambiguity. In the United States, federal aviation authorities recognized drones and manned aircraft, but had no clear category for low-altitude personal flyers. State and municipal governments scrambled to fill the void, resulting in patchwork policies that varied widely from one city to the next. Some municipalities banned all powered scooters in public parks, citing safety concerns, while others permitted scooters freely on sidewalks, unconcerned by their vertical potential. Across the Atlantic, European Union regulators worked to harmonize rules for urban air mobility, but largely focused on piloted air taxis operating at higher altitudes. Regulatory drafts for vertical takeoff and landing vehicles failed to account for fold-and-fly personal scooters, leaving member states to decide individually. In Tokyo, Japanese authorities updated national aviation guidelines to include low-altitude electric aircraft, creating a more receptive environment for hybrid transport solutions. This regulatory patchwork generated uncertainty for riders and manufacturers alike. Compliance officers juggled conflicting requirements for driver's licenses, aviation permits, and vehicle registrations. Lobby groups pressed for national standards that would treat fold-and-fly devices as a distinct category, neither drone nor traditional scooter. Insurers hesitated to underwrite fleets without clear liability frameworks. That murky legal landscape highlighted the urgent need for cohesive regulations. Shortly thereafter, insurers and policymakers would clash over how to assign responsibility when a flying scooter met an unexpected obstacle, walking the legal tightrope. In one city, a minor collision between a cyberfold and a delivery van triggered a flurry of lawsuits, exposing gaping holes in liability coverage. Courthouses became the stage for debates over whether the device should be insured under standard vehicle policies or aviation regulations. In some jurisdictions, users risked hefty fines for unauthorized flight, while in others, they faced criminal charges for operating what authorities deemed an unlicensed aircraft. Insurance companies hastily drafted specialized aerial mobility plans, often excluding lift capabilities under fine print clauses. Premiums for full coverage soared to prices rivaling small car policies, deterring risk-averse riders. Legal scholars compared the situation to the Segway's misfortune in the early 2000s, when confused regulations relegated it to sidewalks or banished it altogether from public roads. Manufacturers and legal teams collaborated to propose comprehensive training and certification programs designed to ensure every operator understood safe flight corridors, emergency procedures, and spatial awareness. User agreements grew into tomes detailing permissible flight zones, noise limits, and maintenance requirements. That wave of documentation, however, risked alienating casual adopters seeking simplicity. As lawsuits multiplied and insurance models fractured, communities awaited a verdict that could either ground the revolution or cement its legitimacy. Meanwhile, visionaries began sketching the legal and infrastructural blueprints that would guide the next phase of aerial mobility. Blueprints for tomorrow, looking beyond immediate challenges. Planners and innovators envisioned a future where aerial corridors crisscrossed urban skies like invisible highways. Regional coalitions discussed cross-border air lanes, linking metropolitan areas, standardizing vertiport designs and charging protocols. International bodies explored treaties to harmonize altitude limits, privacy protections, and noise regulations. Private-public partnerships formed to pilot designated sky zones, equipped with real-time traffic monitoring, collision avoidance systems, and dynamic routing algorithms. Charging stations morphed into community hubs, hosting co-working spaces and micro-retail pods, fostering a new aerial economy. Architectural firms integrated rooftop aerodromes into building plans, ensuring seamless connectivity between ground and sky. Technology developers worked on next-generation features, advanced battery swapping stations, predictive maintenance powered by artificial intelligence, and geofenced flight corridors to protect sensitive areas. Educational institutions launched certification programs for aerial vehicle operators, embedding safety culture into curricula from an early age. Economic analysts compared the anticipated inflection point to the smartphone revolution, predicting that once aerial scooters reached a critical mass, estimated at 5% of urban commuters, the ripple effects would reshape transportation, real estate, and energy sectors. While regulatory and legal hurdles remained, the momentum of innovation carried the promise of a truly layered mobility ecosystem. That vision would come into sharp focus as communities worldwide decided whether to embrace the sky as the next frontier of daily life. Will you take to the skies for your next commute or save it for a weekend escape? Let me know in the comments below, and thanks for watching.